Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Airfix's brand new release of the 1/48 scale Jaguar GR.1 and GR.1A. A lot of hype around this kit, so let's see what it's all about. So then, we're going to be starting off in the cockpit, specifically putting these two sidewall console pieces into position, very reminiscent of quite a few Tammy kits. The beautifully detailed rear bulkhead can be slotted into position, followed by the main control column right in the middle. I can now move my attention to building up the ejection seat. Initially these two halves go together, followed by the rear cushion for the pilot's buttocks. Then this piece here can be slotted in to complete the headrest section. It's good to note that I left off the main cushion section to be painted off separately, as it was going to be a khaki colour. The final thing to do was going to be cement the ejection handle itself through the rear of the seat. Now I can look at building up the nose wheel well. I must say the detail here is absolutely exceptional. I've never seen this level of crisp detail on any Airfix kit. What further enhances this is a lovely build up. I really enjoy wheel wells which slot and fit together almost like a jigsaw puzzle. It's very rare that they have fitment issues, and this is no exception. This jigsaw-esque build-up was repeated throughout the rest of the wheel wells as well, really helping to let the Airfix designers maximise detail in these areas. As you can see, the level of detail is really good in all of these sub-assemblies, but once they were all put together, I could get them all onto little sticks and prime them using Mr. Finishing Surfaces 1500 Black as a base for the painting stages. The first sub-assembly to receive some paint is going to be the cockpit. After looking at some reference images, the cockpit is black, which always makes things a little bit more tricky. But what I'm going to be doing is utilising Mr. Colours C137, which is slightly lighter and more grey bluey black. And as you can see, I'm using it in between all of the major bits of detail to just make them pop that little bit more. I repeat this process on any of the black aspects within the cockpit. After some careful airbrushing, here was the final result. I think it gave quite a nice effect. But anyway, it was time to move on to the wheel wells. The wheel wells themselves are this beautiful yellowy green zinc chromate colour. And to replicate this, I'm going to be using Mr. Colours C352 zinc chromate. And I'm going to be black basing it like I did in the cockpit into all of the open areas, just to create some shading around the details and help bring them out to the viewer's eye. I can then blend everything in to give me a lovely looking shaded effect. I will then repeat this process for all of the corresponding parts in this colour. Once that was dry, it was time to do some detail painting. So I'm going to be using ammo migs, matte black, grey and any other colours just to pick out all of these brilliant details. It definitely took me quite a while to go around all of these wheel wells and paint them and pick them all out, but definitely worth it in the end. Now I can move on to doing a little bit of weathering. I'm going to be using this stone grey panel line wash from Ammo Mig to help pick out all of these details. I went for this light grey colour because I thought it would give better contrast and would be able to accentuate all of this stuff much more. However, I'm kind of second guessing myself if this was the right decision, as it does look very dusty and I don't really know how to explain it, but I'm not too sure. What do you guys think? But anyway, we're committed now, so I repeated this process on the ejection seat, which is coming up shortly, and then I left it to dry. I could now seal everything in utilising VMS's matte varnish. After this, it gave me a good base to now utilise AmmoMig's lock and load, and I'm going to be using this tool to help pick out all of the lovely switches, dials, etc, which are moulded on the control panels. It's good to note that there is an instrument panel and also 2 side control panel decals included in the kit. However, I'm on a personal adventure at the moment to help improve my detail painting. So feel free to use them, I'm sure you would get very good results with them. Once the detail painting was done, I could start to bring everything together. So the ejection seat slots into position, followed by the instrument panel. Once the cockpit was all buttoned up, it could be placed on top of the front nose wheel well. Then I could take this assembly and place it into one side of the nose section. Once this is done, the other half can be cemented onto it as well, with a very nice secure fit. Having a look at the main fuselage itself now, we can start to populate this with all of the wheel wells and other assemblies which I had built earlier on. There are several of the bulkheads dotted throughout the airframe, and it really helps to build up that structural integrity. Once they are in position, the 2 fuselage halves can be slotted together. You might notice that I'm having a little bit of fiddling around to get them to go together, and if you squint and look in the middle of that joint, you'll see that there are some teeth. These teeth have to line up and interlock together to allow the fuselage halves to connect. It's a little bit of an abstract way to do it, but I quite like it. Just takes a bit of fiddling to get it into position. With the fuselage buttoned up, I can bring the nose section and slot it in the front with a very good fit. Spinning the aircraft over, this rear portion can be cemented in place, reducing a seam down the middle which would be really hard to clean up in that area. I'd like to mention at this point how good the fitment is of a lot of these parts. They just need a little bit of a dabbling around with a sanding sponge and all of the seams are gone. Now it's a small task of going around the airframe and just putting on a few of the lumps and bumps and extra panels. Intakes, in my opinion, are always a make or break moment for a model. So Airfix have come up with an ingenious way of using a jig to create your intakes. All you do is put one piece on and then connect the other piece up, glue them together, leave them to dry, and a perfectly formed intake pops off. And when I say perfect, I do mean perfect. Look, there you go, it pops off, and getting it onto the model, you'll see how brilliant the fitment is. It is honestly really impressive. I was not expecting this level of fitment from an Airfix kit. It's a great feature and I really hope they continue to do it in the future. Now it's time to build up the wings. A feature that I really like about these wings is the fact that they've brought round the leading edge onto the underside of the wing, eliminating a leading edge seam. You are left with a seam on the underside of the wing, but for me, I'd rather have it on the underside where there is probably a panel than on the leading edge itself, where you can sometimes end up getting a bit of a blocky leading edge. And on the fine wings of a Jaguar, that is the last thing that you want. As you saw, the wing assembly itself slots into position incredibly well as well. This kit is just brilliant. Some more jigs being used here to help do some pilot holes for any antennas according to the variant that you're going to be building. I can continue going around the aircraft now, putting on all sorts of different bits and bobs like the tailplane and also the overwing stores. Having a look on the underside of the wings now, we're going to be putting on the slaps, the ailerons and also the slats. It's good to note that from what I can understand, you can only display this model with the slats and the flaps extended, which might be a deal breaker for some people. For me, if there's the option, I usually always extend them anyway, because I think it does add a level and another dimension to the models. But nonetheless, it is potentially an issue and something to definitely bear in mind. They do all fit very well though, so that is a benefit. Another neat touch is having this front section moulded out of glass. It eliminates any weird seam lines between what potentially could be quite a problematic area. The pitot tube is also cemented on at this stage, and I'm praying that I don't break it off. I can now have a look at building up the exhaust cans. So initially this fan piece is dropped into the cylindrical chamber, and then we can build up the nozzles themselves. There's a lot of slotting and interlocking to help build up these, and they really do give a very authentic looking can in the end. After the heads-up display has been cemented into position, I can cement the transparencies onto the aircraft itself. These fit very well indeed, and I'm using ultra glue here to prevent any potential fogging up that I might have. Ultra glue is one of the many products that can be found down at my local model shop and the sponsor of this video, Hannants London. Hannants London is your one-stop shop for all things models, from premium airbrushes and an extensive range of kits to live demos. It has it all. We are located just next to the RAF Hendon Museum, so come on down and make a day of it. I know you won't regret it. Furthermore, we have loads of these Jags down at the shop, so come and get them quickly as they are flying off the shelves. Going back to the Jag, I can now start to paint it up in the iconic desert pink colour. Desert pink is a very odd and unique colour, and honestly quite a hard colour to work with. I'm utilising MRP's rendition of it as I think it is very accurate. What I'm going to be doing, like most of my models, is building it up through black basing. What this means is marbling the paint onto the surface in between any of the panel lines to create that initial layer of shading. I found that I get the best results when I turn down the air pressure on my airbrush and add quite a lot of thinner into the mixture. MRP is pre-thinned, however I always like to top it up with some more just to be double sure. Once I've gone around the entirety of the aircraft doing that mottling and marbling effect, I very lightly start to dust the colour over the aircraft to build up the actual desert pink colour. It took a very long time because I had my paint very thin, but this did mean that I had a lot of control over how much of the effect I wanted to show through, and this was the final result. Now that I was happy with the base, I could add a little bit of white into the mixture and repeat this process, but being a little bit more reserved on how much I'm mottling onto the surface and usually directing it on the outer edges of the panels. This really helps me to increase the amount of contrast in my paintwork, which is seemingly becoming quite an iconic style for myself. Once I'd finished with the post shading, I thought it was a little bit too bolshy and in my face for my liking, so I reloaded in the desert pink and just started to blend everything back down to a more suitable level. And there we go, that was the desert pink all finished up. I was really happy with how this came out. I think it looked exactly like the Desert Storm Jags, which I personally had in my head and was also backed up when looking through this reference book. This book is absolutely brilliant. It has every angle of the Jaguar you would ever want, including this one here, an Arctic Jag when they went off to Norway. Now this is brilliant, but then I had this overwhelming urge that I needed an Arctic Jaguar in my life. So after a hectic few days, we had another Jag primed and ready to go. I was planning on using a very similar technique to what I've just done on the Desert Pink, but this time utilising Mr. Colours C331, which is dark sea grey. As I said, I really thin this paint down, and I also bring the air pressure down to really low PSIs, almost about 5 or 6 at its lowest. We really don't need much to get a nice authentic looking marble. At this stage, I'm just trying to create a bit of a template to where the grey will be. Once I've marbled in those areas, I can very gently start to blend everything in, like on the Desert Pink, to a level where I'm happy. Once I was at a stage where I was happy, I can do the post shading stage now, adding a couple drops of white into the mixture and then doing nice tight mottles, like on the Desert Pink, around the exterior of all of the panels to create some nice faded and a little bit of ripped up looking paint. Really happy with how this effect came out. Now that the grey was all sorted, I could move on to the white, which had been superimposed over all of the green aspects of the camouflage. I've never really worked with white to this sort of scale, so I didn't know what to expect. However, I approached it like I approach all of my paints and started off by mottling and marbling my way on. After I had mottled my way to the grey boundaries, I had to outline the demarcation between the two colours. To do this, I brought my airbrush in really close and with a very steady hand traced the demarcation that I wanted. I don't know if I'm 100% happy with all of these demarcations, but hey, it's the best I could do. With the demarcation all traced out, it was now just a matter of filling everything in up to that border. Had to be really careful here not to get too much overspray. Now, up until this point, I'd been being quite careful not to do a super opaque coat of the white, so that this stage here worked better. I'm now going to come in and really highly condense some paint onto the externals of the panels to hopefully create some very gentle shading. I don't know if this is the best way to paint white, but I'm pretty happy with a first effort. I'd say it was a pretty good job. And there we go, I'm now a happy boy. I have an Arctic Jag and a Desert Pink Jag. What more can a man want? So with the painting out of the way, I can move on to doing a couple more of the niche aspects, one of them being the hot section. Initially I masked everything off and then used Mr. Metal Colours Superfine Silver 2 to give it a nice base coat. I find this paint incredibly good for a metal colour, really reflective and really durable. However, it did look a little bit monotone as it was. So I loaded some highly diluted black into the airbrush and post shaded along any of the panel and rivet lines, and this gave a nice heat burnt sort of shaded looking effect. Not too sure how to explain it, but it looked good and that's all I'm worrying about. So then, with the hot sections all finished on both the Desert Pink and the Arctic Jag, that finished the painting. They could be sealed in using GR.1 and then the decals could be put on. These were some brilliant decals printed by Cartograph, so you know what you're going to get. Absolutely brilliant. One small issue which I did have was a missing decal. So decal 161, which is FF, was unfortunately not on the decal sheet. It has been confirmed to me that this is going to be corrected for future releases of the kit, so no need to worry. You might notice that the Arctic Jag is not a scheme available in the kit, so for this reason I just picked a few random decals from a couple of the other schemes and mixed and matched them to create my own scheme, so excuse the inaccuracy, but we're going to roll with it. It's now time to do a bit of weathering. Initially both the airframes received a black panel line wash just to highlight all of the lovely rivets and panels which are moulded on this aircraft. I didn't want it to be too overpowering, so I didn't leave it to dry for too long. After that had been dried, I can move on to some more directed oil work, and this is going to be using a black oil brusher dabbed around a few of the panels and then slowly blended in, like you can see on screen now. I utilised that reference book which I just shown to help understand where the main majority of the weathering would be, and I found it was more along the front nose section and the spine of the Jaguar. This was the final result. I really didn't want it to be too grimy, so I was happy leaving it at this level. It could be sealed in using VMS's satin varnish, and this gives me a really nice finish as well. I can now move on to doing the final assemblies. We're going to start off by putting the very complex looking landing gear into position. I didn't film the build up of these, but they are very easy to put together. The only reason I didn't is there are a few fiddly aspects and a few places where I wanted to make sure the angles were exactly correct. One thing I will say is there's nice big locating lugs, so these are really secure and you're not going to have any issues of these sagging over time. Now putting the landing gear doors into position, I had them in the closed position, but Airfix do allow you to open them if you want to. Something which does have to be opened is the air brakes, and I mean, who wouldn't want these open? They're so cool. Now onto cementing the ordnance onto the aircraft. You might have noticed that the drop tanks are in grey and green, and I just did this to add a little bit of variation into the ordnance and to kind of indicate that maybe they haven't been painted up yet, ready for the conflict. There is a nicer range of ordnance that can be put onto the Jaguar, and it is all very nicely detailed. Now we really are coming into the final stages now. The masking tape can be removed from the canopy to reveal that there is no overspray or anything like that, which is a lovely sight to behold. Then the included FOD covers can be put into the intakes, and finally a quick dust off, and that concludes this build. So thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you've enjoyed seeing both of these Jaguars come together. I know I enjoyed every minute of this build, and I'm so happy to see both of these in my collection. If you have enjoyed the video and you would like to see more content from myself, remember to like and subscribe and turn the bell on so you don't miss a video. Let me know what you thought of these down below in the comments, and without any further ado, enjoy the final photos and videos, and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye bye.